All right, we're rolling. Welcome to episode
And
2.
we're live.
We're live, Meditative Monkeys podcast, episode
That's
number
it.
2.
Welcome. Ben, how are you today?
I'm great, man. How are you? Welcome back.
Thank you. Welcome back. This is episode 2, as Ben said, and one went smooth, so I hope 2 will go even smoother. We got a little bit of upgrades here. Different rooms, I believe. You're in a
Yeah,
different room.
yeah. Thanks for taking time out of your schedule, launching us to the moon to do this podcast.
Yes, absolutely. This is actually in support for my boy Elon Musk, my Tesla stock.
Represent.
We're not even going to the moon with Tesla. We're going right to Mars. My stock
Fantastic.
through the roof.
Going straight to the bank.
I had let me pray on that. I hope so.
It looks like you're connected to him right now.
Yeah. So I was telling Ben earlier on that I did a little bit of upgrades here, but just like everything in life, once we upgrade one thing, then we figure out that we need something else upgraded. So first we got the webcam. As you can probably see, the HD is going. We're wide zoom here. And the headphones, yeah. Sorry guys, I was just gaming. I'm a big nerd prior to this.
Sorry, it's fantastic.
And after this.
You got a
Yeah,
fucking
of course.
Halo.
Of course. Yeah. So you know when you're a baby and you can't hit your head?
Yeah, well, you shouldn't.
That's pretty much what I got going on here too. It's a little bit of safety, low ceilings down here, unfortunately.
That's fantastic. You're a whole set. You're coordinated.
I do my best.
So we're going to continue our conversation.
We are.
Kind of revolving around who we are, what we do, and why it matters. So we kind of touched on it last week, but we thought this week would be a good chance to dive into a really fundamental question, which kind of seems a bit basic, and in practice it's almost self-evident, but it's you try to put it into words, try to articulate it, it can be a bit of a challenge. And that question is, why do we train? Our conversation is largely around kind of using the body as an access point to, developing the self and going through life, and sort of achieving goals. And we do this through a physical practice. We train the body, we spend a lot of time in the gym. That's our occupation. It's something we think about a lot, but in essence, on an individual level, I think it's a really useful question or exploration to understand why it is you do anything, right? Because then it can help inform decisions. Because if you know why you're doing something, then when you're presented with a decision, then that decision can be put in the context of, well, why am I even here to begin with?
Exactly. And it could possibly even lead you into avenues you never knew you wanted to go down.
Sure. Yeah.
And
all kinds of opportunities open up.
Yeah, of course.
Yeah, absolutely. So, I mean, let's just start with it bluntly, Steve. Why do you train?
Why do I train now, or why did I start training?
Well, let's start at the beginning. I think that'd be a good point to begin.
In the beginning, I'll go where every 16 to 21-year-old goes in the beginning of training, for the most part, on the male side at least. My boy went to school. Again, shout out Stephen Coots. I think I showed him last time.
Yeah.
And he came back and he started training at school, and he said, let's go. So when I started training, honestly, the goal was, how can I get big muscles and how can I pick up girls? Like, literally, that was the goal.
Were they one and the same? Like, are the big muscles to pick up the girls, or do you think there's something about big muscles?
That was, there was something about, like, not necessarily big muscles, I'm exaggerating, but more like,
Sure.
like go to the gym, get bigger, start working out, you know what I mean? And hopefully that transfers over to picking up girls as I thought it would. Doesn't really work like that. As the memes go, it's more guys that are asking you questions than picking up girls when you start working out and you start being a regular at the gym and some sorts, and making progress. I think that's like the big thing too, because people, that's kind of a big issue at the gym, and we'll probably touch on that too with the why do we train. But
yeah,
like, progress is a pretty scarce thing in the gym world.
Yeah, when you pay attention.
Yeah, when you really pay attention and you go for years and you go to the same location for years. One of the big things that became prevalent to me, prevalent? that works.
Well, it is a prevalent issue, but it might have become, I don't know, prescient, or who knows.
It just came to light.
Sure.
You notice it, right?
Yeah.
And over the years, like just like you just see so many people being the same. And I'm not talking about like months. I'm talking about like just years of like one of the same location, just seeing people come in. And it'd be different if they were talking about maintenance and kind of trying to stay where they are and they're just comfortable. But a
Yeah.
lot of these people are seem to be on the more like hardcore side of like trying to make gains, whatever that means, whatever with strength gains, like size gains, endurance gains, whatever. Like it's almost like they had the why do they want to train, but they never figured out like the how to, you
Sure.
know. It's
Yeah.
like they know their why, like I want to come to the gym and get big muscles or be strong or anything like that, but they never kind of explored the how to, or kept it very surface.
Or I wonder if the why, because often the why can begin as something very general, very kind of low resolution. It might just be, I want to get in shape. That might be it. Or because why? Because I don't want to get sick, or I don't want to,
Sure.
get injured. And then over time, that goal becomes, or that why becomes a bit more high resolution, a bit more detailed. And I wonder if for some people it starts as this sort of low resolution why, this kind of vague, which is enough to get you through the door and
Yeah.
get you into a routine. But then at
Yeah.
some point, I mean, but I don't know. But let me put it to you this way: what if? I mean, we always talk about how frustrating it is that more people don't appreciate their bodies and the need to take care of it, and it'd be really great to see more people just move more and be more active. So at the very least, those people that are coming into the gym day in, day out for years and years and years, at least they're turning up, and they are moving.
Oh no,
So,
of course. Of course, at the end of the day, like if we're tiering, not movement,
yeah,
doing it wrong, doing it right. Obviously, on the list of just moving, I was talking to someone about this the other day at a family event, and we're talking about just like structural health and how it transfers over to strength and even like size and everything like that. Um, but we're talking about just like even just building strength in general, going to the gym, and I'm like, even if you have terrible structural health to a certain, like not terrible, but like you have hindrances here or there, tight back from sitting down, and you know what I mean, a little bit of a forward shoulder roll from being on the computer all the time. If you're going to the gym and you're pounding out strength, until you get a structural breakage that might not ever happen, then you are keeping your body a little bit at least confined in that wrong structural, you know what I mean, you're creating almost strength in that bad structural health in itself. And that has something to it to keeping people a little bit more healthy, I think. You know what I mean? Like I see some guys in the gym that practice strength, they have horrible posture, but for the most part, health wise, they seem pretty good. Or to go real life example, a lot of construction workers, right? A lot of construction workers don't have the greatest posture from carrying their tools all the time and everything, but a lot of these guys live pretty, I wouldn't say like full healthy lives, but comparable to a lot of office worker people where you think they're running their body down less, or that's like the consensus, right? They live a lot longer and a lot more functional for a lot longer than a lot of these office worker peoples. And that's just especially from doing like a lot more consultations and seeing people sitting in front of me. That's like my consensus too, right? Like I've seen a lot more office workers at younger age having a lot more difficult problems to deal with their body than these construction workers coming in at older age that complain, oh, my my back, my shoulders. Prime example too, like a cello, right? I feel like that guy really got a lot of it. He's been working out for a long time,
Who's
but
this?
he Marcello from Aura. Remember
Marcello.
Italian guy, little cello?
Oh
Hey
yeah, yeah, yeah.
Steve,
Oh sure,
hey,
sure. Yeah, okay.
hey Bello,
Yeah.
Steve. Right? And him, like I feel like he really uses work as a tool. And I think we could even do that too, and kind of make that understanding be a little bit more cross-platform. But what I was even if they don't know it's a tool, a lot of them just from doing all that, like the jackhammering or shoveling or whatever they're doing daily, it's that continual repetitive movement in your body that I think is the most important part. As we kind of talk about the movement itself, and then where can we direct that movement?
Mm.
Let's start with movement. What does that mean? And I think that's where a lot of people are not starting, and they're starting more in the exercise area of like chest. How do I get a chest? Do bench press. And instead of saying, okay, what is a bench press? They just know bench press is push up and down. But what does that really mean? You know what I mean? And if we kind of could look at it from like a movement standpoint, I think we can, or get people to understand that. I think they would be a lot better off and even a lot smarter in what avenues they choose, because now you have kind of like a reference point versus the reference point is just bench press and you're 170 pounds and you should be able to bench 175 pounds. You know what I mean? Like those are the gauges. But then the question I always breathe to people, and just to go back to why do we train, is if you don't know you have issues or underlying health problems and structural issues, then that 175-pound bench is almost irrelevant. You're going to try and get there and you won't be able to get there because you have all these hindrances you don't even know about because your gauge is just the bench, right? If you understand that your shoulders are what caused that movement, and then we can break down how to actually understand the shoulders, and then in that process maybe figure out if there's any issues up and down the body or with any sort of functions going on, then we can look how to clean those up or make those work on how to move that mechanic of the bench press. And then we can start using those gauges. But I think people jump to those gauges too soon, right? And then just to kind of, as I said, reiterate back to the question, my why do I train started a lot more for like the vanity reasons and a lot more of the surface reasons of like, I want to be able to bench heavy. What does that really mean? Because heavy, as we know now, is relative, right? But I want to be able to squat heavy. But I never really took the time to understand the tools that are doing that. And then after, as we were going to talk about a little bit of a second question, why do we train and how has that changed over the years? As you mentioned, injury and stuff like that. After the injury, which I had a hamstring injury, I think 2017 now.
Yeah.
We talked about. And my why do I train kind of slowly evolved and slowly kind of changed to, and that was the kickstart working, as I keep saying, with like you and Julian, to really understand a little bit, like just a little bit more of like the chains that need to happen up and down the body, the connectivities, a little bit of the functions, you know, nothing that has to be too in depth. And I think part of the biomechanics stuff and all the medical stuff they talk about, and just all like the medical terms for like bones and whatever, and like synovial joints and this, I think it's overwhelming for people. But if it were in a simple context of like ball and socket, hinge, right? And then I started to learn those simple contexts, and then you can really start to like break the systems down. Okay, now the bone structure does this. Now what are the ligaments, tendons, muscles have to do? And then once you understand the vehicle, then it's a lot easier to manipulate your body to perform that product, which is the bench press, right? So my why do I train, I think, evolved from a lot more of a vanity, just kind of hollow goals type of thing, just focusing on numbers, but not really knowing why I want to focus on the numbers, just because I'm supposed to get stronger, but didn't really understand what true strength was, to having the injury, which forced me to take a step back and then really understand what I was working with, and really allowed me to go through a process to like ask my body questions. You know what I mean? And that happened from everything from being in the gym, doing deadlifts and asking my body how to do it properly and what needs to happen to make that happen properly, to, you know, bending over to put my shoes on. Right. And that's kind of what I really started to learn and get across to myself. And that's how my why do I train changed, to everything just being in the gym to I'm always training. You know, my favorite joke with Aquam, because we always laughed at it all the time, is I'm always flexing, right? And he took that a little literal off the bat, but in not a weird way, in a literal way, we're like always flexing, right? Like you're sitting up, like something's working to keep you up, right? And if we can just even like pay attention to what's happening, then we can start to ask our body questions. You know, you don't have to get the right answers right away, but as long as you're asking, then you can start to find. And that's what I started to do. I started putting my shoes on and I started to go halfway down, and I would feel like I was doing something wrong in my, you know, hip rotation or my, you know, extension, flexion, whatever was happening in my body. And I would reset the position. and I would come back down and try and fix my misalignments, right? And you guys were a big help with that.
On the idea of, if that, for you personally, that why expanded from being something that was more about vanity, and trying to meet girls, and then it developed into wanting to understand your body more, increase the function or the options that you have available, and that's great for you as an individual. But I'm thinking now for the average person, because I think this is a big struggle. It's how do we can agree that the average person would benefit from a movement practice, would benefit from some sort of regular physical activity, but the struggle or the difficulty seems to be that hurdle of just getting started. And this is where the big question of the why becomes important. And I think vanity is a really common one. We can get
I think more common than looking for health, to be honest.
Absolutely, yeah. Well, exactly.
Yeah. Well, at least it's a start for a lot of people, right?
Yeah, exactly. But then when you're talking about evolving into this idea of function, I guess a struggle that I've often had in having this conversation is, well, or in even thinking as a thought experiment, you think about how the modern world is far less physically demanding than it's ever been.
Of course.
The average person doesn't need to go hunting and gathering, let alone.
And I would say exponentially, right? Like it's happening like
at a faster and faster rate. Yeah.
And the amount of laziness that we can have in our lives is just piling on faster and faster and faster.
Well, physical laziness, perhaps, we can be quite active in some ways in what we're thinking about and what we're reading and watching and consuming. But yeah, perhaps that's physically active because life doesn't demand it of us. So the question becomes, well, what does it matter? Like, why, if I'm a specialist, if I'm just doing this one type of physical activity, whether it's something that's quite a lot of physical activity, like a builder, or perhaps it's someone who's not doing much at all, they're just working on a computer all day. Why does it even matter that person should develop function, should increase their range of motion, should get strong? Why is that important, do you think, for the average person when life doesn't demand it of us anymore?
Well, that's all personal to the person too, right? Like you have, like I've had clients in the past that don't even really care to make a difference. Like they're forced to be there from somewhere else. Someone else is paying for them, especially younger, like students and stuff like that. But some people don't even strive to be healthy or don't even like have that goal to be healthy, right? So it's like, that's a weird question in itself because some people are just content in a weird way, right? Like, for example, there's people that want to change, and to give them those examples of saying, sitting at your desk is really deteriorating your body and you want to be able to live a longer life and all these things. But I guess, what do you tell someone that answers that I don't care? Right.
Yeah.
And that would be like a dead stop. Like, how do you tell someone, like, listen, like, dude, carpal tunnel, like, low doses, like, you just like slip discs, like throw all these things,
chronic
right?
pain. Yeah.
Chronic pain, like headaches, like they're feeling not good, and they're like, I just don't care. You know what I mean? And like, I've had that before, and it's like, you're just kind of dumbfounded because you're like, how do you tell somebody to do something? And the weird thing that I think that you'll attest to too is, it is one of those things that even for the most part, the person that like is just the most against it is like, they start doing fitness or start doing something healthier, and they'll tell you that even though their mindset prior to going into it was like, I didn't want to do it, I love myself for like, not I love myself for who I am, but like, I just don't care to be healthy type of thing, you know what I mean? They usually flip the script and they're like, wow, I should have done this a long time ago. Right.
Yeah.
And I think that's like a pretty high percentage of people. I think, like maybe people that are forced to lose weight, a lot of them too, like they figure out like damn, like I should have been doing this a long time. Like, a prime example, actually, I had a buddy that used to work out the pavement Danforth gym all the time, and like when like he had a lot of problems with weight, a lot of problems with like a lot of things in life, and he was at the point where he was like content, like fine being like a bigger, heavy set guy and like just like out of shape and everything. And I believe he had like a life-changing moment. I don't know if it was for sure just a family member or like a mix of some other stuff that went on. And he decided to change his life for the healthier. And it was more kind of out of necessity at the beginning. And now he's, you know, challenging himself daily, pushing his body to limits and good limits, you know what I mean? Like out there in the gym, really put forth the effort to get knowledgeable. And he'll be one of the first to say, like, it's not something I wanted to do, I did a necessity. And once you start doing it, you start to realize, right? And I think in a weird way that's kind of even the dangers of our sedentariness now, is you forget how good the endorphins feel, you forget how good you feel when you're capable.
Yeah.
And you also forget what capable was, slash you never even knew what capable was, you know. And I think that's a big thing for them too, is they just think they're kind of like just capable, like, you know, like I'm fine, right?
I think that's a really good point. I I found an experience, my personal experience, and you've seen this in others, that the reference point is really important. That if you've got no, I like the saying that to a worm in horseradish, the world is horseradish. And so if that's all, if,
You're right, you're right, yeah.
you know, if that's all you know, then that's all you believe to exist. And I've certainly had experiences where I've maybe changed my training or changed my diet or just changed some part of my lifestyle, and felt so much better for it, like better than I ever have. And you realize, wow, I didn't even realize that life could be this good, or I could feel, you know, this healthy. And then the natural extension of that idea is, wow, how many people are going through life assuming that the way that they are is just normal. And I think this is a really, really big problem, where on average we don't move much, we don't, you know, maybe we don't eat the best foods, or we eat too much food, we don't get good quality sleep, or we don't get enough sleep.
Hydration.
Water is a problem. But because this has been the way for someone their whole life, or for a lot of their maybe adult life, and then also, you know, the peers around them, their culture and their community around them is also like this, then we just assume, well, this is how I am, this is how I've always been, this seems to be how
This is how
others
it's gonna
are,
be.
so this is just how it is, this is normal. And we're confusing or conflating what is average with what is normal. And all it takes is a singular experience, a singular personal experience, where you just find you find yourself in a new reality.
Something along those lines, like enlightenment. And just even build off what you said. I think even societal averages become a problem too, because if I'm out of shape, and I think this is a big issue for a lot of people, because I've even heard people say this to me in front of my face. Well, you know what I mean? I look better than the next guy. And I'm like, well, just so you know, average now is borderline, if not in an unhealthy area.
Sure.
Right? So if you're looking at yourself as average, then a lot of people are looking at themselves as healthy. If I'm along with the average, I'm healthy.
Yeah, exactly.
You know what I mean? I'm like, you know, you know, I'm like, I just, with all the facts we have and all the statistics, we know that average is creeping more and more into an unhealthy range.
You don't even need statistics and averages, man. Just go outside and look at people in your area, in your ordinary life. Like, ask yourself. But you could do an experiment on a personal level, where, you know, just bring some awareness to what kind of the quality of the people around you. I don't know, this could be your friends, your family, but just the people in your area. If you go to the mall, or go to the shops, and just, you know, what's the energy like? You know, what are their bodies like? Do they seem, you know, strong and lean and healthy and standing up tall with their shoulders back? Or is it more of a lackadaisical,
like gloom, just moseying around type of?
Exactly. And you don't even need to bring that awareness to yourself and your own habits. I think it can be easier to notice it in others. But then you might realize, and then maybe reflect back, was it like this 10, 20 years ago? Has it changed over time? Has there been a decline? And then you can look at your own life in a similar way, because, man, this is the biggest problem, is that we assume that with age comes an inevitable decline in all aspects of our lives, you know, our health, our well-being, even our mind, our mental health. And I don't think this is necessarily true at all. But
I don't
go
either.
on.
No, I'm gonna agree on your point. Like I personally don't either. And one of the things that I've even growing up, and I'm sure you've heard this too, a lot of like the older people, like no matter usually like the people that are like 5 years older than you,
Hmm.
right? Or anyone older than you for that matter, they always give you that, listen, bro, 25, you'll see.
Yeah, yeah.
20,
Wait till
20,
you're in your 30s. Wait
yeah,
till you're,
yeah,
yeah,
dude. Easy now. You're 25. I'm
yeah,
27.
yeah.
You'll
When I
see.
was your age, ooh,
Yeah. Easy now. You're 27. Bro, when you get 30, you'll see.
yeah,
Oh yeah. And now I'm like touching the rim, grabbing the rim, doing stuff I've never done before. I was never
yeah,
capable of
yeah,
before.
exactly.
And like they keep telling me like these ages, and I'm like, dude, I actually feel more, literally feel more capable than I ever have in my life physically.
Have you ever heard of the idea of the black swan by Nassim Taleb?
No. I know the movie with Natalie Portman.
Fantastic movie. Oh, I love that movie.
Didn't watch it actually. Talking shit. I just know about it.
Oh, it's great. I mean, yeah, if
Yeah.
you're into that kind of thing, yeah, I think it's really good. But Nassim Taleb he's written a fair few books, and one of them is called Black Swan.
Hmm.
And one of the core ideas is essentially that it's very hard to um, to find something to be absolutely true. I'm going to paraphrase it, but
Sure. The
it's just the
general
idea.
idea.
It's easier to disprove something than to prove something is the essence of it. And so
Sure.
the metaphor
Okay.
would be that you could make the statement that only white swans exist. And the problem with that statement is that it would require you to travel the entire world and find
Hmm.
every single swan that exists and count them all and be like, okay, they're
And
all
make
white.
sure you have every single swan.
And then, yeah, and then there are all these issues like, how do you know that you found every swan?
Yeah.
But it's very easy to disprove that statement because all it would take is discovering a single black swan.
Black swan. Yeah.
And so, I think of these. I love these examples of black swans where we assume that there's a truth that
Yeah.
with age comes decline, that you can't learn new skills past a certain point, and then all it takes is finding one individual who is refuting that idea by like the example I showed you the other day of a woman who is, I believe, in her late 60s, 67,
Hmm.
68,
Hmm.
doing a 1 minute and 15-second freestanding handstand that she'd only learned in the last 3 years.
Unbelievable. Prime example that we've even seen in real life. That little Asian lady that used to come work out at Aura,
Mm. Yeah, yeah,
right?
yeah, yeah.
And you talked to her personally, and she claim that she just started picking it up, type of thing, or
Yeah, so
along
we're,
those
we're
lines.
talking about this woman who would turn up every single day doing,
Yeah.
pretty
From out
impressive
of nowhere too,
gymnastics.
right? Like it was like pretty much from out of nowhere. Like we had a turf at our workplace in
Yeah,
Aura, and yeah, this little tiny powerhouse, just zen. I would call her like zen. Like she almost just like floated everywhere.
yeah. It's
Like
like
she was
you
so
did
like
didn't listen to music, didn't get distracted, just came in, did her thing on routine, very focused, very impressive, extremely flexible,
mhm.
extremely strong, like working on handstands and chin ups and pushing and you ask her, what's your background? What have you been doing? And are you a gymnast? And she goes, oh no. And who's your teacher? She goes, I don't have one. And you're
It's
like,
like
are
wow.
you? Am I being punked here, or what's going on?
Hold
But
on though, but then this could breed a question too of just what you said about what you know, right? And just to kind of attest to like her answers in a weird way, like by me personally paying attention, and I can only attest to what I know with my body myself because I'm the only one in it and I can't be in your body, so I don't know what's going on,
yeah,
right? We can talk about it and try and depict as much as we can,
yeah,
but personally for me, the more I started to pay attention, the more I just started to know what my like shoulders and my hips are doing, whether it's
hmm,
wrong or right. You know what I mean? Whether it's aligned or unaligned in a sense. You know what I mean? Because we don't know what wrong or right is. There's no such thing as kind of wrong or right. We can point out certain things that might not be as good, but who's to say what's wrong and actually right?
Well, I think it all depends on context. It's all relative to context. So if and this comes back to that idea of it being very difficult to establish something is absolutely true because
Sure.
often wrong and right is decided by comparing it to a standard, and maybe it's a
Yeah, and then
standard
back to
that's
standards,
and
eh?
maybe it's a standard that's been taught to you
Yeah,
by a certain teacher, and the teacher has
yeah,
said, okay, always do this movement this way, never do it that way. And so if you ever do it in the way that is categorized as wrong or to never do, then you can categorically say, well, I've done it wrong, but I've done it wrong in the context of this standard.
yeah. Of course.
um, and then better or worse all depends on your goal. You know, if your goal is to do a one-armed handstand and you just did a 3-plate squat, then is that, you know, right or wrong in terms of getting the one-armed handstand? Well, it's like, well, maybe it's not
Maybe
really
something's
relevant.
transferable.
Maybe
But
something's
I don't
transferable,
know.
but maybe it's not really relevant. But if I'm doing
Yeah.
a one-armed handstand and I actually hold it for a few moments, then I could say, well, that's more correct
Yeah.
in terms of
Yeah.
achieving that goal. So it's all these things are relative, and it becomes very
Mhm.
important to recognize that we can often get locked into these dogmatic ways of thinking by onboarding knowledge, like going to a course, reading something in a book that says something must always be one way and never be another way.
Of course. And on that note, just like I would tell people too, is don't get sports specific stuff or like streamlined stuff like powerlifting or strength training confused with health sometimes. Because
Yeah,
powerlifting, the positions you're
sure.
putting yourself in, you're trying to move maximum amount of weight through the smallest range of motion you can that gives you green light.
And this brings it back to the why. You need to have a very clear understanding of why
Exactly.
you're doing what you're doing, because then that puts into context and gives meaning to what
Mhm.
you're reading and consuming.
Of course.
Yeah, if your goal is to get really strong, then you better be reading powerlifting or information on powerlifting, for example. Probably better that than yoga in
Of
the
course.
short term, but it depends on what you're doing and why you're doing it.
Yeah. And just to finish on what I was saying before about the Asian lady and stuff about,
Yeah,
sometimes if you just if you know, then you can transfer that knowledge, right? And what I was getting at was, the people that sit at their desk, it's not necessarily that they can't do certain things. I think it's more of a fact that they've been doing this for so long that their body doesn't even remember how to do the other things,
yeah, yeah.
right? And
Well,
when
muscle
I
memory
start
is real.
Of course. And when I start to pay attention to my body more, even just in practical things of life, like even just reaching for something or using my mouse, and that just gave me a lot more knowledge of my shoulder.
Mm,
So when I would go into handstands, I wouldn't necessarily be going from like the root of structure and being like, okay, hollow body, this, that. But I was able to now feel like, okay, I would have those like touch points of like hollow body, this and that, but I would be able to now understand what my shoulders were doing versus a lot of times before when I was just starting off with you guys and I wasn't really paying attention to my body outside of the gym. It was almost like that much harder to create that correlation
mm.
because you're creating like that separate of gym and life, like they're two different things. And if your brain is always kind of like on or low power mode when you're through normal life and then on for the gym and then low power mode in normal life, that brings a lot more transferability. And who knows, maybe her background, she's just always been active her whole life, walking around carrying stuff, and just her body's been used and she just has a better natural understanding of it. And for her it's just like, oh, upside down, well, I've carried stuff my whole life, let me just, oh,
Yeah.
okay, you know what I mean?
Yeah, to me, it seems like a difference in global versus isolated thinking. It's like when
Hmm.
I think a problem with fitness culture is that in the West, it's largely a product of bodybuilding culture, which is all about muscles, and it quickly evolved into an isolation practice.
Of course, yeah.
Even though the OGs are doing, big compound movements, they're doing full body exercises, they're
Yeah.
using the isolation exercises as kind of that fine tuning supplemental work. Companies like Nautilus develop these machines that has turned isolation into the mainstream. So
Yeah, and I have a theory on that too, right? Because like these bodybuilders that still carry that like knowledge and carry that like understanding of compound lifts and body connectivity, like Arnold and those guys, like those guys had very functional bodies,
yeah, dude, Arnold doing his your feet together, like,
dude.
heavy back squat, like feet touching, ass to
Yeah,
grass, heavy back
dude.
squats, like
Chest
unbelievable.
flies on the bench, touching his knuckles to the ground.
Yeah, yeah,
Like without, whether they knew what mobility was or not, they were doing it, right? The problem with, I think, the fitness industry though is a lot of people, and just like anything in life, and especially in our like in our mass media and just mass consumption age, and especially when, just like you said, things start to become more accessible faster, we figured out that we can make a product from trying to simplify everything.
mm,
And that's where like isolation came in. It's like, instead of doing big compounds like rows and then isolation biceps to get your biceps, like do this machine for biceps and you'll get biceps.
yeah,
And then instead of people creating separation and isolation through globalization, they're creating separation isolation through separation of the chain.
yeah,
And then
yeah,
it hinders their gains, you know changes their actual structural makeup. A lot of time you see the guys walking around with their palms, with their back of their hands facing forward because chest is too tight, and a lot of that is just from just bad tension and trying to create these movements without understanding what the actual product is, right? Or what
It's
the
almost,
actual machinery does.
this analogy might not hold up, but I'm really into cooking and food, so often I'll kind of relate to that too now. And it's like you've got a dish where instead of focusing on the quality of the produce, the actual, you've got meat and 3 veg, right?
Yeah.
Instead of focusing on where is this meat and vegetables coming from, how am I cooking those, you're fixated on
the time of the cooking or something.
Well, no, you're fixated on the last minute touches of like that squeeze of lemon and a little bit of parsley on top, and your whole cooking endeavor becomes, how do I make every piece of parsley perfect and the exact quantity of lemon juice? It's like, did you take care of the basic meal? And that this is kind of the idea in the way that we train the body in the mainstream, though it is certainly with influences like CrossFit, I think, which has been a generally positive force. There is more of an appreciation of doing a variety of full body movements. But yeah, we still, when we go into the average gym, we see, like I was just at what would you call it, like a mainstream gym yesterday, doing legs, and I just used the squat rack, and it's surprising to me still how few people, even though they got like 3-4 squat racks there, how few people actually take advantage of them and use barbells. It's a lot of machines, and I'm looking around at these machines and realizing that the workout I just did of like 3 exercises for legs would replace pretty much every single lower body machine in that gym.
So my question to you, just on this note, do you think the fitness industry, in a weird way, because obviously it's great that people are going to the gym, as we touched on earlier on, like if you're not going to go to the gym, or you're going to go to the gym and do a leg press, like for the most part it is better to go do the leg press unless you pop your knee out or whatever, which I've seen done.
Be sensible.
That one, right. But
don't use a laptop.
Definitely don't do that. Do you think the fitness industry is doing a disservice to people then by trying to make it so easy and simple, and you know what I mean? Like, because in a weird way, it's like you could blame the people, and you can literally say, you can go out and get this information. Like if you want, like again, if they wanted to go, they can go sign up on itoportal.com and start learning in-depth stuff of how to use their body. Like the information's there.
Yeah.
But at the same time, it's like, if they're going to offer a product, it's like Facebook not wanting to take off like certain opinions because people should have opinion. You know what I mean? It's like, where's the line? Like, where's the line of like letting people just aimlessly hurt themselves because, you're expecting them to go so far to the way to get the knowledge. It's not, you know what I mean?
Yeah, that's a good question. And I think first we need to be careful or just to clarify, it's not the whole fitness industry, but maybe the mainstream fitness industry.
Sure. Like the big box gyms are the ones that, like, for example, Good Life had the Fit Fix machines.
Yeah, exactly.
And they were, or the Fit 10 or whatever. And they were just literally advertising, like, do this row machines, and
these 15 exercises in 30 minutes, and it's a complete full body workout. Yeah.
Right.
So I think I think it's very seductive, and it's a very subtle trap, because the argument that the owner of a big box gym might make would be that, well, look, we're making it simple, we're making it accessible, we're making it cheap, and whatever gets people moving, and it's very hard to disagree with that. I think that's
and of course, right. And then that's the hard part of the question, a sense of like, where do you draw the line? Because then, as you said, like they can just say, we're offering this to people, and it's up to them to figure out how to use it in a sense.
Well, I think that's one of the problems, is that there's there's a very low emphasis on movement education. It's the machines are made to be kind of so easy and simple to use. And the problem with that is that, yes, the average person is going to get in, start using a machine if they've never done any kind of fitness or strength training before, and they're going to get results, because anything is better than nothing. And we're following the principle of progressive overload, which is essentially, do an intense workout, push yourself, rest, and then next time do a little bit more in some way, and then rest and then do a little bit more so that your progress is gradually increasing over time. The problem with the machines is that you're quickly going to hit a plateau because the movements themselves are very simple. You're locked into a machine. Your body's being braced, so you don't have to use any.
There's not a high scale for that.
Yeah, well, there's no skill ceiling at all because there's very little neuromuscular components, very little motor control because the machine is just guiding where you move your body.
Yeah. No stabilizers, nothing like that.
Yeah.
Well, low end.
Exactly. The machines move you in a linear way. They move you in straight lines, and you don't have a single straight line in your body. The body doesn't tend to operate in straight lines. Even throwing a punch, it's not in a straight line.
Of course.
As straight as you want it to be. So you start to move like a machine, or it encourages you to move like a machine, which isn't really how the body's built.
Well, and just even to touch on your note on plateauing, right? I think that's a big issue in itself too, because I've seen a lot of people, and I'm sure you've noticed and seen this too, where they hit that like 3-month mark and they never go to the gym again.
Well, that's the problem, is that you get results to a certain point and then it starts to plateau and then you get demotivated.
And you say the gym doesn't work, or
you just, or you think it's I'm just lazy, and in some cases it could just be that you didn't have very great resources available. So it's tricky because it's like it does get people in the door, but there's culturally there is a real lack of appreciation and respect for the need to learn about the body and how to move it. That it's an educational process.
Well, I think in a weird way too, right? It's something I personally think that this is something that is going to blow up in the next 5 years or so, that they're going to have to put physical ed. So I think it was Reagan or Nixon. Reagan, I think, introduced something back in the US, like when he was president, where they had like, I don't know if it was global, like throughout the whole US, or if they just did it in increments in states as a test, but they had like mandatory like physical activity, like training days where like they'd be just doing monkey bars and like squats and like stuff like this, like functional movement stuff.
Yeah.
And I wonder, and I hope that the world goes to a point where we start integrating this back into little kids' lives, and understanding and giving them an understanding of what it is to be healthy, movement wise, even diet wise, all that stuff, because we've grown so far exponentially, and these companies have grown so far in one way to be able to take advantage of people, that people no longer have that information or that knowledge anymore. Like they don't learn about nutrition in school. They don't learn about, understanding physical health and how sitting down at that job that you're paying thousands of dollars to go to university for is going to screw your back, and you have to pay thousands of dollars again later to fix that. You know what I mean? Or like paying for prescription meds because all the McDonald's you're eating because you think McDonald's is healthy food, right? You know how many clients I don't know about you later in your training life, but probably more in the beginning, and how many clients that I've had for sure, people that I've seen, that will tell you like the most horrible meals they think are healthy.
Or even if they recognize that the food some food is healthier than others, often it's an issue of quantity as well.
True.
Like portion sizing. Like I've been surprised to have conversations where, you'll ask someone, well, when do you, if you go out to eat at a restaurant or go to wherever and you get some food, when do you stop eating? And they'll stop eating when the food is,
when the plate's empty.
The plate's empty. And that's just a given. But then you ask, well, how do you know that, that's the right amount of food? Because it's not like there's a standardized meal portion. If you go to one restaurant, then go to another restaurant, you're not going to be given the exact same volume of food.
Well, and I think that was like a little stupid trick that these companies did too. And even government did it in a stupid way by, forcing the companies to put the nutritional facts. But man, you've never taught people how to understand the nutritional facts.
How to interpret it.
Like it's not hard. Don't get me wrong. Like, it's not hard. It's easy to find out. But like, it's one of those things where you have to actively search for it.
Yeah.
Right. And it's one of those things that you feel like in life should be taught from day one. So
can I ask you, just to bring things a bit deeper and to bring it back around for you personally? We're talking about how for the average person, to a worm in horseradish, the world is horseradish.
Sure.
If you don't have an access point to these practices, then the problem is how do you get in? How do you start to think about the body as this thing that can be developed, and how do you start to take care of yourself? So I want to ask you, what do you think was different about you when you're growing up, and you know, you've obviously from a very young age continued this path of pursuing healthy living. What was the difference there? Is it that the people around you were also doing that same thing, that you got lucky? Was it a set of circumstances? Is there something you think that's unique about you as an individual that guided you? What do you think that has allowed someone like yourself to continue a health-oriented path versus, let's say, the average person that we're talking about?
Personally, for me, coming back from like that soccer background that I had, always being physically active, I was always on the go, and like especially my parents were very good with being able to get our physical outlets out, and we were at the same time though too. And the hard part, you're having a child now. When he gets older, he's, even though you're going to push healthy things on him, he still has to be receptive to it.
Sure.
Right. And a lot of kids, you know, don't get me, I was just lucky enough personally to be receptive to, you know, liking to play sports. You know, a lot of kids,
So you think it's something that's just built into you?
I think it's just been the environment since I've been a kid. You know, I've had a lot of people around me. Like my family used to host all the sporting events, the boxing matches, the soccer games, people over all the time. And I just think it became such a just a thing that I've always been around and seen. So for me, that's kind of what I know.
Yeah.
And just like that, you know, like anything, you're a sponge as a child, right?
Yeah.
Like, you know, if my parents were reading books 24/7, chances are I would be reading books 24/7.
Yeah.
Right? My dad played and watched and breathed soccer 24/7, and for the majority of my life I did that too. And I thoroughly enjoyed it. Thoroughly enjoyed it. Loved every minute of it, right? And the physicality, I think, allowed me to go cross platform. And because I played my whole life, I was lucky enough to play higher levels, and I think that transitioned me more into understanding hard work. Like hard work, just work ethic in itself, pushing your body, listening to your body, understanding your body, not to an in-depth that I not to a depth that I know now, but it was like almost like, you know, when we talk about like it's almost inception in you without you knowing it. It's like you're building these skills without even knowing it, and you kind of reflect on them after. And just going through all those processes really kind of set me up for that routine, you know, going to practices every week, you know, especially when I was playing higher level and I was playing 6 days a week. It was no different going to the gym 6 days a week for me.
Yeah.
I was already doing that. I was already
Yeah.
pushing and exerting myself 6 days a week.
You already
So
had
for
the
me to,
habit.
yeah, so for me to go to the gym 6 days a week and exert myself, it was less of like a task, and it was more of like, shit, I push myself playing soccer and I actually enjoy this. Let's see how far I can push myself here. Right. And then what started to be cool about that, and I've been lucky physically too, right? And again, maybe it's just because I played my soccer my whole life. Maybe I'm a bit lucky genetically, maybe because I started early in soccer, it helped my like certain things grow. I don't know what the whole package worked or how it worked together to get
Sure.
me where I am. But you know, I've been lucky with my genetics and my physique. And I think once I started to really put in effort in the gym, and I started to see praise from other people in certain ways, whether they were, you know, talking about like my strength or my size or whatever, that really also help motivate me to keep going. But in a weird way, you know, I think everything does happen for a reason, but in a weird way, I think that also led me to get injured.
How
Right.
so?
Because I was pushing my body to its structural limit, and I never really addressed my patterns from years of playing soccer. I never really addressed, you know, injuries that I've had in the past. For me, injuries in the past, right? Because I always thought, and this is why I think it's important for people, just to backtrack a little bit to what we were saying in the beginning, important for people to understand a baseline understanding of what their functions of their bodies are and what it really is. Almost like a car. You know, if your wheel's wobbling, you shouldn't drive that car. For some people, for some reason, we're limping like crazy and we're still walking. I know you have to do it, but you can also ask your questions why you're limping, right? And I think if you're not asking those questions, and you're going to run into issues, and that's kind of what was happening early in my life, is I would get injured, and my assumption is the body heals, right? The body heals. And what I didn't know was all those ankle rolls, all those hamstrings that I pulled, groins, little quad strains here and there were causing compensation and causing my body to take over. And really, even being younger and not knowing the importance of rest, especially with injury. You know, you're hurt, keep playing.
Yeah.
Is it that bad? Can you run? Yeah, no problem, right? And coming from a competitive background, competitive mindset, definitely would not stop myself. I would do it now because of knowledge, experience, and understanding. But before it was like, can you run? Yeah, go. Can I not run? Spray the ankle with the cold stuff, and now I can run. So go.
Yeah.
And you know, it was tough for me because my body responded really well in the gym when I started, and continued to respond well and continued to grow and get bigger. And because of my athleticism, I think that allowed me to get past certain structural issues. And then pushing myself, I think I ran into a point where I pushed my structure too far, and that's where I had that catastrophic failure.
And then you started an exploration into deepening your understanding. Yeah.
To NASA of my brain.
Exactly.
I NASA my brain.
So it sounds like your background is that there was a certain environment that you were brought up in, where there was a culture of valuing physical activity, being not even just being physically active, but because you're talking about sport, it's about also excelling, you know, trying to strive for excellence in what you're doing, developing skills, being able to be strategic, and there are a lot of qualities that go into that. But now I'm thinking about the average person that we're talking about, who, you know, they're in their 30s, their 40s, their 50s, and maybe they've dabbled with exercise throughout their lives for various reasons. Maybe they watch, you know, footy, or they like to watch a boxing match once in a while.
Play once a month.
Yeah. But maybe they weren't brought up in that kind of environment where those habits and those values have been instilled from them from a very young age. But maybe let's say that there is still, you know, we're not talking about the person who just doesn't care for taking care of themselves, but they're someone who recognizes, yeah, I should probably exercise more, I should probably eat better, but I don't know, I don't really know how to start or whatever. What advice would you give, or what do you think would be a path for someone like that, who hasn't been brought up, or hasn't been fortunate enough to have been brought up in that kind of culture, but still has some desire to change in that positive direction? What would be, you know, if you were in that situation right now, what do you think would be the best move to make?
Personally, and just, this is even me from like working in other aspects of my life, and just paying attention to how you can be the most efficient, right? Because that's like what we want to be in life, is the most efficient. If we're going to put time into something, we want to get the fastest return. If you're coming from an area where you don't know nothing but you want to make a change, invest in learning. And I think that's a big issue for a lot of people that start at the gym and turns them off, or you know, turns them off for the gym for life, or you know, gets them an injury, is for some reason with fitness, you know, even a lot of people want to start there the furthest away from being healthy, they think they could do it themselves. You know, like if you're going to go fix your car, as I tell people all the time, you're not, you know, you're going to go to a mechanic for the most part.
Yeah.
You know, if you know how to fix your car, by all means fix your car, but that took time to learn. You know, if all you've known for the last 20-30 years is sitting down and not eating the greatest and just living an unhealthy lifestyle, or living a lifestyle that you knew that you thought was healthy and you're figuring out that it isn't, invest in someone that can give you the knowledge.
Now, do you think that investment has to be in a coach, or could that investment simply be in time, just to go, like, what do you think of going online, finding, you know, tutorials on YouTube, or?
Yeah, and that comes back to like personal, right? And just like I talked to you about, like I'm a good physical learner. Like, and now I do attest a lot of that process to me paying attention to my body now, and I'm able to manipulate stuff a bit better that I see, because I can just visualize and feel my body making that position, or putting in that context that I want to. But I think for a lot of people, if you feel like you can be a physical learner and understand and take in information well, then maybe the online route would be good for you. But if you find that you have a hard time grasping something without someone teaching you, then I think the in-person is valuable. My personal opinion, though, for everyone in the beginning, I do think the in-person, now it's tough with COVID, because you're missing a lot of that touch aspect. But me and you were very hands-on with clients, and you'll be able to touch a lot more on this too, because you were doing a lot more hours than I was on the gym floor. But that hands-on aspect, I think, is invaluable. like being able to tell someone what to do, but then even just tap and say this,
mm,
squeeze.
mm,
And then their brain is already thinking of what the hip needs to do, what the knee needs to do. And then all of a sudden you just add a squeeze here and you lock that chain in. And then they
mm,
have that correlation now. So I think building correlation is important. And then if you can understand that correlation, then you can start going on to the online, because you'll be able to manipulate and be able to use your body a little better, right? But if you want
mm.
to touch on that touching point, like you were great with your clients and really getting them to understand stuff, I think you'll be able to really expand on that.
Yeah. Well, I think certainly having another person to give you feedback is really useful, because it gives you both a mirror and a different perspective on yourself. I think like there's even a lot of value just to filming yourself often when you're training.
Yeah, I was going to say you should touch on that.
Yeah. The problem with that is, as a big absolute beginner, is that you don't know what you're looking for. So you do need to get some sort of an idea of having a reference. And again, that's where something like, if you find a really good reference video online of, say, someone doing a certain movement and then you perform it, there's still an issue though where individual structure plays a role. So if you find the way that someone's squatting and you try to emulate that, but your hip structure isn't, your anatomy isn't built for that type of squat or performing it in that particular way, then you might just end up frustrated and potentially hurting yourself. But go on.
Sorry, even just to touch on that quickly too, with what you were saying about like going into a squat. If you don't know where you're going and you don't know what your goals are, then you're not going to know how to get there. So you might say, I want to do a squat, and you're trying to mimic the guy's squat, but you never learned how to actually get to that squat, right? And that's like, I think the tough part is, you're saying, for people.
Yeah. So, and look, I think for a lot of these questions, there are great resources already online. Like I found so many great videos of various different coaches. The problem is you kind of need to know what you're looking for, because there's also a lot of crap. And a lot of misleading stuff too. But yeah, I think if you find yourself a good quality coach that can work with you in person, or at least work with you through video review, if you're doing some sort of online correspondence thing, then that's a fantastic tool, because it gives you, you get a lot of confidence and guidance, but you're getting that feedback, and that coach is also going to teach you to almost coach yourself, to be able to look at your own videos and start to assess your own form and make your own corrections. So the question is, how would you find that good coach? I'd say
learn how to be creative too, right?
And be creative. Yeah, absolutely.
So I think that's the next thing.
So yeah, if you find yourself a coach who they themselves demonstrate that they have a high quality practice, and they walk the talk, and then also that they have students that have, they've got results. And ultimately, if what they're saying makes sense to you, sometimes even if there's a lot of truth in what someone's saying, sometimes you'll hear someone talk and it's just like the way that they articulate the ideas doesn't really vibe with you. But then someone else might just present it in a way that's like, wow, this makes a lot of sense to me and I really vibe with this. So, but yeah, absolutely working with someone, and eventually you can get to a point, like the ideal scenario, I think, is better than a teacher or being there constantly, is having a training partner. Like if you and I are in a gym together, even though we could be working on different elements, we don't have to be doing the exact same thing. We can spot each other and give each other feedback. It's like being, you've got your buddy in the gym who's spotting you with your bench and just going push, push, push. Well, imagine that, but then also being able to give you technical cues. And be able to demonstrate.
We had that dynamic. I miss that a lot, actually.
Yeah, and because that's something that is very mutual. It's not just I'm paying you and you're the teacher, I'm the student. It's we're both teacher and student at once. It helps deepen relationships. I think it's a great way for, like, some of my clients do it, take their programs that I've given them and do it with their siblings, for example. And I think it's great for them, because they're getting to take the knowledge that I'm giving them and then try to pass it on, and it's deepening their understanding of their own information too. So it's really useful to be a teacher once in a while to help other people.
Did you ever train with your clients? Did you ever do like
not in the way that you would? So do you mean where I'm doing the workout as well?
Yeah. Where like you guys are just doing like a session like that.
No, I think the reason I don't like that is because so the obvious advantage to that, as far as I can tell, is that
Sure.
they get to see your form, so it gives them a good reference for technique. And also, if you're able to demonstrate that kind of energy that focus you can bring to a workout, like that can be a really good motivator. Yeah.
Yeah.
The reason I have never done it, or don't do it for, like, I'll do an exercise with someone for a
Sure.
period, but not the full workout. And
the
reason is I'm very selfish when I train. Like if I'm working out, I'm focused on what I'm doing and I'm trying to nail it. And I find it very difficult to both to divide my attention between what I'm doing and then also giving my client the full attention that they need.
Yeah.
So I'll often, like, I actually, I would actually get frustrated with clients sometimes when I would start demonstrating and then they'll start doing it with me. And I'll be like, no, stop. I want you to watch me. And maybe that's actually better for them to do it with me.
I get frustrated at that too. Like there is a time and place where like they can do it with you if they've already done it so many times and you're explaining like a kind of like a finishing touch on it versus like the meat and potatoes of the movement. But when you're like dealing with someone that's never done a hinge before and you're going through it and they're just like, and you're like, dude, just watch, just watch, please.
Like, I've been practicing this for years. I've got a whole routine here. Just let me get through my 3 minutes and then I'll pass it over to you. But, I find that I've never gone through the full routine for that reason, because I just want to give them my attention and I think that even like it's a similar dynamic to doing a class, or even if you're working out with someone. Like if you and I are training, it's sometimes we're working out together, but actually often it's while I'm resting, you're working, and vice versa.
Exactly. Yeah. And that's kind of the model I would take with my clients too when I was working out with them. I would very, very, very rarely do something at the same time as them. And if I was, for example, let's say we're doing dead hangs, I would dead hang at the same time, right? I would make sure that the first set that they do, I make sure I'm cueing them first. Again, you're taking time out of your workout, and that's something that like I'm a little different in that. As you know me, I'm more like free flowy, just work out when I can or want to type of thing, which has its hindrances in itself. We talk about that all the time. But it allowed me to kind of go like 70% with them, but really give them like that 30% that they needed. But that addition of working out with me kind of made up that other 70% a different way, if that kind of makes sense. They were still able to get that attention. I was still able to cue them, put them in where they needed to be, especially when we're working like at the same time. And then throughout the other times, I would just be separate from them. Like we'd be working out, I'd be doing the same exercise, giving them that reference point of what I wanted them to do. And even through my whole set, it was more of like a live action, like a live action role play of like
a tutorial.
Yeah, almost like a full on like a YouTube video that you watch just right in front of you. And I would literally get them sometimes to be like, okay, like feel here.
Yeah.
You see that, right?
Yeah.
Okay, so when you go, and then they'd be in that position, be like, okay, you see, now we gotta have that happen here, or whatever we're doing here.
And that's a very individualized and detailed approach. I think a big problem with, you see this with the way traditional group class is taught, and I see, I think this isn't even a problem with things like yoga. Obviously, there are great teachers in every field, and there are poor teachers, but one of the features of a poor teacher is it's like they're just doing it for themselves. You've got that yoga teacher in the front of the class. They've got 30 students in front of them, and the yoga teacher's going through this awesome looking flow, but they're not paying attention to the students, and they look great. But it's like, is this about us, or is this about you getting your workout in?
Yeah.
Because there's no individual cueing. And this is the problem with just doing the workout along with the people. But it's like, you may as well just watch a video at that point of someone doing a workout, because you're not learning anything.
And that's why it's tricky. And it actually took time for me to kind of really to refine it and to make sure it was not. I made sure personally that I only chose the people that would really benefit from it. First of all, right? Because they have to be a person that's going to want to do it, and then B, going to be able to benefit from the scenario that we're going to be in.
Yeah.
And I made sure that I figured out how to refine it so it was more of a value than doing a one-on-one session.
Yeah.
Right? They're not necessarily more of a value all the time, but I kind of did it in points where when they started to really understand something and they could push themselves and really go heavy, then I would bring my motivation of me being there with them. But as I kind of refined over time, as I said, I did a lot less working out. I would work out with them and push myself still. But if they had to do 2-3 sets and I don't do a set, I would go right through the sets with them. If I had to go make sure that they were doing something right, I would skip, as I said, I would skip sets or skip exercise and just do them later. Because again, at the end of the day, it was all for them. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Going through those workouts was all for them to really get that experience. Because I found, and personally for me, as you know, I deal with people, I'm like a very like people person.
Mm.
Just my personality kind of really resonated with that style too, with the people that I was bringing in to do it with, and I
Yeah.
feel like they really did. And I actually have asked them personally, right? Like that's the thing I'm not afraid to do too. Is like I'll do a session with someone, and I'll be like, "What'd you like?
Mm.
Did you like it? Did you enjoy it? Was there
Yeah.
stuff that you didn't like? Do you want to do this again? Do you not want to do this again?" Again, always looking at that end goal that they want. But as we know, there's many ways to skin a cat,
Mm.
right? And I think that's one thing that trainers don't do too, is ask a lot of questions.
Mm.
Kind of like, I made this program, let's do it.
Mm.
And then it kind of sets, and even just being on the management side too, just kind of expanding on that. I've had a lot of like clients like be even scared to talk to their trainer,
Yeah.
right? And if you're
Yeah.
if you're not asking the questions of the trainer and you're just assuming everything's hunky dory, it might not be, right? I think
Yeah.
that's why even asking yourself, that's even to go back to the source of what we're talking about. That's why always asking yourself questions is important in any sort of regard, right? Like,
Of
from what
course.
does my shoulder have to do to, what am I eating today, or should I be sleeping now? Just whether you do it or not, I think a healthy place to start is asking questions.
Yeah, man. Actually, as a little COVID tip, I found it really useful over the past few months to have a little conversation with my wife at the end of the day, just asking, "Hey, what are
Cool.
we going to do tomorrow? What's the plan?"
Yeah, cool.
Just so I have an idea of like, yeah, just some structure, and we set some goals of the things that we want to accomplish for that next day, and it just
Hmm.
sort of helps put things into focus. Yeah, it's really important to ask those questions and just have those conversations.
Yeah,
I know you've got to go soon. I just want to finish on one little thought.
sure. Yeah.
I'll maybe present my idea here and get your thoughts on it. So you just mentioned that a problem with a lot of trainers, and I think you find this in any industry, is these cookie cutter kind of approaches. It's very formulaic, and I think it makes sense because if it's efficient in a sense, because
Yeah.
as
It's
a
almost
business
like
owner.
yeah, it's almost like the machine thing, right? It's like that you can
Exactly.
utilize that bicep machine, right? Like you can utilize the information you're getting from the governing bodies, the certifications, but it's like, are they really teaching you how to use it? And
Yeah.
that's kind of the iffy question. Some courses do, some courses don't.
Yeah, well, I think, dude, I think the biggest, I mean, you talk about machines, I think the biggest problem with humanity, if we want to go deep philosophy on this, is
Sure.
that we have a tendency in ordinary life to operate as a machine, just to be on autopilot. We were talking this autopilot. Like, I think
Yeah.
autopilot is the biggest, it's not evil, it's the biggest problem that we face as, just as beings, as living conscious beings, is
Fun,
operating on autopilot.
funny you're touching on that, because I was walking down the street today thinking about this. I think the lack of the connectivity with your body and paying attention to your body sets you into autopilot in a weird way.
Yeah,
I
absolutely.
find the more that I've started to pay attention to my body in every regard, as I joke, even like sitting here right now, paying attention to how my body's feeling and literally saying, like, am I sitting as right as I want to feel in this chair? I think that it adds a lot more of like a human aspect to you, and it keeps you a lot more present into what's going on. Like I
Yeah.
joked with you all the time that the more I did mobility, as I say all the time, do my mobility and understand my body, I start to feel like a ninja,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
And am I actually like a training to be a ninja? No, but in a sense of like, I'm paying attention to my body. It's like signals are sent out all the time. That's what I'm assuming, because I'm telling my brain to do it, and I'm hoping that my brain is doing it. And because of that, if something's falling over here, I'm a lot more attached to all this.
Yeah.
So for me to reach here becomes a lot easier than someone that has internal rotation. Then they don't even know that their body, it's like the signals aren't there,
Yeah.
There's a
And
weird thing, we could touch on energies and this and that, but there's a weird thing to like paying attention, and
yeah.
like everything has that energy,
Dude,
everything's atoms, right?
it's the fundamental quality. It's the most important quality, is paying attention. It's
Yeah.
when you start paying attention, you'll start to see your own automatic thinking. You'll start to see how much you're on autopilot physically, mentally, emotionally.
It's almost like a weird, like low, like I like low battery mode, but like a low battery mode meditation all day.
Yeah.
You know,
you're
it's
just
like
putting
an active meditation.
you're on bare minimal effort. Everything is reflex. You know, people say something. We joke with you, man. Remember with the idea that for those that don't know, Steve, there's I'll just roast you for a second here. There's a tendency, you know, we'll catch you, we'll be telling you a story, and you'll be like, yeah, man, 100%, absolutely, 100%, you got it, for sure. And you can tell. I mean, you know, when someone else is doing it, that you're somewhere else, or you're just not even there at all, because maybe you're thinking about something else or on your phone. And it's like it's that autopilot of just, you're on reflex. Like someone says something to you, and you're like, yeah, like it's like, hey, how are you? Yeah, good, thanks. How are you? It's like, that's not how you didn't consider that answer at all. It was just a purely reflexive response. And we take that for granted in just everyday interactions. Hey, how are you? Good, thanks. How are you? But I think we take that experience of reflexive living and we spend our lives like that. And then time slips by and we wonder where our lives have gone, and how the hell did my body turn into this? How did my mind turn into this? How did I become this? It's because you've been asleep the whole time. You've been on autopilot.
And don't forget, it's like anything in life, right? It's continual work. Like even if you find yourself paying attention, that doesn't mean that you're not going to go into autopilot. You know what I mean? And that's like, and this is why, like, even when I talk about emotions and feelings and stuff, I tell people, it's like, don't hide the feelings. You know, understand them. It doesn't mean that they're not going to arise anymore if you understand it. What it means is when it does arise, you're able to deal with it that much better and faster and efficiently.
And it allows you to create space, because I think there's a big fear in dealing with emotions, for example, because we think, well, that's what I am. If, you know, for me, it's anger. You know, when things don't seem like the right things happening, there's a feeling of anger, and there's a tendency to not want to go to there to avoid it, because you think, well, like that's who I am, and I don't want to acknowledge that I am anger, that I'm angry. But when you pay attention to it, it actually creates a space where you realize, well, I can actually observe this anger, and if I can observe the anger, then I am not the anger. There's actually there's a gap there,
and you get to understand it. But
then
you have to ask yourself questions, right? Like, and that's the hard part for, I think, people, and I think even as a saying going forward, the key, I think, out of all this for people, whatever regard they're going to go in as a trainer or as a client, ask questions. You know, you can never have too much information. Details do matter. And the more that you know, the bigger, better picture you can draw, you know, in any regard.
Exactly. So 2 final thoughts. The first is on asking questions. The best bit of advice, or one of the best bits of advice I think I've ever, it wasn't given to me directly, it was part of a seminar, but it was,
Which seminar?
Stuart McGill, the one of the world's experts on back pain from the University of Waterloo. I think he's just retired as a professor, but if you look up Stuart McGill, and he is world renowned for being this expert on back pain, which statistically I think it affects 80% of people in the Western world. Chronic back pain,
literally probably going up as we speak.
Yeah, probably more than that, but maybe conservative estimate. And this was his specialty. He was a professor in this, and he would do. I attended a seminar called the 3-hour back assessment, and it was basically
Did they explain how they quantified those numbers? Like what is considered back pain, and what is like that threshold? You know what I mean? Like
that's a really good. It's a good question. I'd have to dive into it, but I think on that level, that 80% stat is just self-reported. It's like people
like, do you have back pain? And people are like, yes or no.
Yes, okay. Exactly. It's like, I have pain in my back, and it's like, is it always there, or is it there a lot? And they'll go, yeah. And then his whole thing is like, well, let's try to understand this. Why is it just in their heads? Is it actually is there something physical going on? Like, what causes the pain? What can we do about it? This is the whole deal. And so this seminar was about the 3-hour back assessment, and it was Stuart McGill explaining his process when he meets someone for the first time. And at that point in his career would often be like, high-ranking officials in government, or professional athletes and whatever, and they'll get flown out to him, or he'd get flown out to them. And he would say,
nice.
oh yeah, and he'd say he would do this initial assessment with them, and it would be this generally a 3-hour assessment would be his initial assessment. And he would basically talk us through it. He would give us, he'd explain his process. And the best bit of advice I've ever received, I think, professional advice, at least on this kind of technical level, is he would say, when I would meet someone for the first time and I would sit down to do an assessment with them, I would not have any pre-written forms, nothing that's, no set questionnaires. I would come in with this, a blank piece of paper.
So smart.
And he said the assessment wouldn't begin when they sit down in your office. The assessment begins when you meet them in the waiting room. And at that point, as a practitioner, you're paying attention to their posture. You're paying attention to how they stand up and out of the chair. You never walk in front of them as you walk to the office. You walk beside them or behind them so you can watch how they walk. All this is information gathering. And it's very important because as soon as you tell someone you're gathering information, they're going to change their behavior. So you're trying to catch them in their natural environment. He would drop a pen early on, and he would ask, and he would wait for them to pick it up for him, and he would watch how they'd bend over and pick up an object. And this would be the assessment. It would not be anything that, rote or automatic. And this to me speaks to that idea that true quality comes from paying attention. You can't get it from going on autopilot.
Just to jump on that note, that's really what I picked up on when I started paying attention to me. Just out of proxy. Honestly, I didn't do this because I read it somewhere. I didn't do this because I thought it was right. Honest to God, it was just out of curiosity and proxy. That is how I did my consultations.
Yeah.
And that's how I kind of walk in. I drive the car now, Ben, and I'll walk down the street, and I'll be driving the car and I'll be seeing people walk down the street, and I'll be like, oh, that person's right hip is jacked up. I'm like, that person's left trap, I'm sure they have neck pain. Right. And it was funny because it was kind of just out of like me noticing my issues, and then noticing that a lot of them are cross-platform because of we're all doing a lot of the same stuff. And then I started to see these patterns, and then I started to, as I said, pay attention to my consults. I would go pick up people and I would go talk to them, and I would even tell people halfway through the consult, I go, as we're talking about, we get to an injury, we used a little bit more of a formality. I didn't. You know how I did my consults. I threw that book out of the garbage. I would just talk to people because it was the most important, right? I didn't like asking questions either. From that point of I feel like it was streamlining people's answers in a weird way. You weren't getting the truth from them.
Because I think you're thinking the book's going to do the work. If I just ask all the questions that are in the book and then put in the results, then that's all I need to do. And you're not thinking.
And it was so much more even valuable. Like after when I would talk to them, and I'd be like, how's your right shoulder? And they're like, why do you ask? And I'm like, well, I noticed, when you're carrying your bag, this and this was off. Do you have issues with it? And they're like, funny you say that. My right shoulder has been giving me problems for the last 5 years. And I'm like, let's talk about it.
You're like a fitness psychic. So I'm getting messages. The right shoulder, your shoulder's bugging.
But like honestly, to them it felt like that, but in a weird way, and you'll attest this a lot too, because you're really good at that too, is like it's almost like when these like, and I'm not going to sit here and say I'm a smart guy at all or anything like this, but like when you hear like super smart people talk about like and they're trying to get the point across that what they're doing is simplicity. And through the simplicity creates that complexity, and people are like, I don't understand, and like, or like a mathematician, they're trying to do each part of the equation one by one. And it creates that big picture. They're not looking at just the equation, you know what I mean? And when like, it was just like, when you start looking at it through like the simplicity of just what the hell does my shoulder actually need to do? And how does that need to work with the immediate connection? And then how can I expand that? And then how can I have this work to this? And then how can I have this work to this while I'm twisting? And then how can I have this work to this? And then once you start to do that, then you can really see other people's limitations when you start to push your limitations. Right. And that was like kind of the cool part for me too, because that's kind of one of the reasons why I really enjoyed working with certain clients at a certain point, with Jamal, especially Hannah and David. Those were my three like bread and butter that I liked, because and I even told them to this, I would give them free sessions all the time. And I wouldn't even take money or keep track of sessions, because what I found funny was the more I paid attention to myself and the more I helped someone else pay attention to them, the more that I found out about myself. It was like a crazy like return that I was getting. It almost felt like I was like cheating them out of money by taking money, because like I was getting better myself and feeling better and performing better. And I was like I'm learning as you're learning.
These are the great teachers in any field, are not the ones that are doing it for the money, but are doing it because they are students first and foremost, and they love learning, and they realize at a certain point that in order to continue to learn and grow as a student, you need to start teaching. And so then you become obsessed with the teaching, because it's just another stage of being a
learning.
student and learning.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Continual learning.
So, I mean, just to tie it all off and to answer that question myself of why do we train? I think sometimes it's easier to understand what you're trying to avoid than what you're heading towards. And for me, I can only articulate this now, but I think my whole life I've been gathering these experiences that led me to this understanding that I want to avoid living life on autopilot, and that leads to I believe deeply that it's operating on autopilot that contributes to every problem in the world. And I don't mean, I mean that literally.
Oh, dude, even nuclear disasters.
All of it. Yeah. I think
like
it's reflexive automatic thinking. I mean, we talk about ideological thinking, right? Like whether I don't want to go into politics, but let's say you're prescribing or subscribe to a certain political belief system, whether it's like the leftist or the right or some other, whatever you want to call it. The problem in all cases is automatic thinking, where you just whatever comes in, you have a set answer or a set thought about that. It's just autopilot. It doesn't matter what the domain is, whether it's fitness, whether it's politics, whether it's music. If you're listening to music and you just hear like someone, you can tell when someone's phoning it in and just not trying. They're just going with what they already know. And I think this is the big problem. And so for me, training the why is because it's this always accessible, free in terms of, you don't need money. You do need to have time and space, but you don't need to spend money on it. It's always accessible. You always have a body, and it's a wonderful, wonderful access point and way to struggle against living life on autopilot. And then from that, you start to learn so much about yourself, which becomes a very positive, you start to develop positive goals. Like, well, I'm doing it because I want to continue to grow and evolve and develop these certain skills. But at the starting point, I think it's about trying to, at the base, like in the depths of it, it's about trying to avoid living life on autopilot.
And that honestly, that's why I appreciate you so much. And you know who I appreciate a lot too for that, for helping me really like push my mindset and really continually like help me to like understand it, not just to ask questions, but how to ask questions, how to break stuff down. You and Andy, my Asian client. Remember Andy? He was he's really good at looking at everything from all sides, really thinking about stuff, not just taking, like, as you said, the autopilot answer of like, this means this and just that's what I know, take it. Like, he was really good, and like, you're really good at like really asking the questions to get you out of the autopilot mode and to really get your brain kind of continually problem solving, right? Like, my conversations with you over the years, my conversations with him, and as I said, like, everything takes work, consistent conversations with you, me and you continually pushing the envelope on what we're talking about, and just hearing like, your rebuttals and like all your points of view really like help me continually ask questions and learn how to ask better questions too. And I think that was really important, continual learning, right?
It's all part of that same process, whether you're having those conversations with yourself or with other people. It's striving to not just go through the motions, but to like be engaged. We talk about active listening. It's like, am I listening to what I'm hearing, or am I just waiting for my turn to speak?
And on that point too, like the consultations, I had to.
Exactly.
And that's why I was so happy that like you were in my life too, because you actually helped me develop in my job too. You know what I mean? Just again, all those things of reflecting and not knowing it, but like looking back at it now, like it was like a really big like help and ping pong back and forth of like learning in one aspect and like taking it to you and talking to you and then learning more in that aspect and applying it, and then vice versa. It was really like it really helped with like my development and just how good I feel about myself today and all that stuff. So I appreciate that, Ben.
My pleasure. It's been great. So just the baby out there. So
we have a special guest.
They're in the other room. They're outside. Okay. They're looking through the window.
We have to get them on.
Yeah, one day. So autopilot is the enemy merch coming soon. Wait for the
dude. We should do it. We should do it. Hey, okay, we're all actually getting the talks, guys, for real.
Yeah, swag. Get that swag happening.
Might as well start it early.
So I know you have to get going. We'll continue this next week. It's been fantastic.
Yes, sir.
for those, we didn't go through this last week, but for those that have made it to the end, thank you.
Yes.
Steve, how can they reach you?
Email,
And what's that?
Instagram, search Steven _ Zorbas on Instagram, or steven.zorbas@gmail.com. If you have questions, guys, anyone reach out, honestly, and Ben will give you his information too after this, and I'm sure he feels the same. Questions, concerns from a client side, from a trainer side, by all means. We're not geniuses. I don't think we look at ourselves as geniuses, but we have some experience, and if you have questions and you want to hear our side of those answers, I'm sure both of us will feel free to reach out to you guys.
Yeah, if you just want to have a conversation, absolutely.
Yeah. And again, like I talked to Ben, if you actually want to come on and talk with us too, we might even look at doing some things like that in the future. So
yeah,
stay tuned, everybody.
So that's how you can reach Steve. You can reach me at Meditative Monkey on Instagram. Benjamin.byfield@gmail.com is my email address. Let's have a conversation. But thank you very much for tuning in.
Thank you, guys. Baby's calling, Ben?
Now it's the dog.
Oh, both babies.
Yeah. For all the babies. All right. Thank you for listening to the Meditative Monkeys podcast. Until next time.
Over and out.
Thanks, Steve.
Thank you, Benjamin.